Good afternoon and welcome to this session on study abroad in Africa. My name is Dr. Jason Sanderson. I am an assistant director in the Office of Global Education, and I advise for the majority of the programs in Africa, particularly all of the programs that are semester programs. Today's session, we're going to be going over all of the options that exist, and I'll be talking to you about which programs are currently running, which ones will be coming back after a hiatus, probably next year. And we'll hopefully, if technology permits, we'll also be having a visit from our on-site coordinator in Stellenbosch, South Africa. So the first thing I want to go over just briefly is what are the requirements for study abroad in general and how they pertain to the programs that we're about to review. So overall, if we're looking at the semester programs, the general requirements are going to be a 3.0 GPA. That's going to be at the time of application. It needs to be maintained afterwards, but that's what we're looking for initially. And 2.7 if you're looking at summer programs. Now, when it comes to language, there are lots of programs that do not have requirements. There are a few that do have requirements, most notably those that are in French-speaking and Arabic-speaking countries. So all of the programs in the French-speaking countries have some, at least, expectation of past knowledge of French, depending what you're looking to do with the language. If the program has coursework taught in French as opposed to just the inhabitants speaking it, then you'll be expected to have a certain level of French that allows you to be then proficient and sufficient in the language. When it comes to Arabic, the only program that has a requirement for Arabic, it would be one of the program options in Morocco, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But overall, we try to have as many programs as possible that are accessible to as many students as possible, since so many of these programs are in multilingual, not only bilingual, but multilingual settings. When it comes to getting yourself there and getting prepared to go, all students would be required to have a passport. Visas are going to vary greatly from one country to the next in what is required. Some will require that you apply for a visa in advance. Others will require that you put in documentation for some sort of permit in advance, but you get something on the ground. And other programs, you'll actually just do all of the work when you get on the ground. So that's something that we would talk about individually. If you have any particular concerns about your own status, whether that be because you're in the process of renewing your passport, have a different citizenship or have multiple citizenships and you're not sure how to go about applying for the visa or the timeline to do that, I would definitely ask you to reach out sooner as opposed to later so we can look into that, because it's not always self-evident exactly what the requirements for some of these different cases might be, and we may need to look into that a little bit further. I've broken down this presentation into two sections, one for the English-speaking part of the continent and the other for the French-speaking. The English-speaking programs, as you can see, are quite a few. They're from one part of the continent all the way up to the Sahara. So if we start towards the bottom near Botswana, there are several programs that both of those programs do involve opportunities for taking classes with local students. The reason there's an asterisk next to those programs is that those programs are not currently running this academic year, but we fully expect them to be back next year, so 2021-22. Ghana, same thing as Botswana, in that students take classes alongside local students. Unfortunately, also on hold at this time, but a very popular program as well because it is in West Africa, where there are a lot of students who have studied some of the history of the area and want to experience that firsthand, and it's one of the few English-speaking countries in the region. As you can see, in South Africa, we have quite a few programs: University of Western Cape, several SIT programs, which I'll discuss in a moment, Stellenbosch, as well as a summer program. Now, the University of Western Cape and Stellenbosch University, those both are programs where you can take classes alongside local students. Because they do follow the local university calendar, it is important to keep in mind that the university calendar is reversed in the Southern Hemisphere, particularly in South Africa. Interestingly, for some particular reason, it is not exactly the same case in Botswana, even though it's a neighboring country. So you do want to make sure that if you are looking at information online, whether that be specific course information or anything else that's time sensitive, that you are looking for the appropriate semester for when you are hoping to go. If you're looking to go in our fall semester, that would be the local second semester. And if you're looking to go in our spring semester, that would be the local first semester. So that's very important to make sure that you are looking at information that does apply to you and what you are looking to do. SIT, or the School for International Training, is a partner that we have in many countries on the continent. You can see 4 of those programs on this page here. Their programs are very highly focused on a particular theme, and you see the names of those different themes here. With that comes the guarantee that the classes will be offered, and that you have full expectation of exactly what the content will be. And sometimes, because sometimes there is a bit of a question for how exactly things will run in certain universities, sometimes students do appreciate having that stability. The important thing to know is, though, with that stability comes a decision that you are signing up part and parcel for a set course load. There is no variation in that, no deviation from that. And so students know in advance, though, exactly what they will be taking. One of those courses is during the last month of the program, and that is going to be a course that you design and that you use to conduct firsthand field research related to the subject that you're studying within the theme of the program. So it's a very unique experience, not for every student, but for students who are looking to have a very, very immersive experience into the local community, and to then study that very, very in depth, and using locals then as informants for their research studies. It is a very, very enriching experience. The Summer in Cape Town program, as you can see, follows the same sort of thematics. It's shorter. However, it is also, the other important thing is it is run by Georgetown faculty. So that's another thing that students often do appreciate. Keeping in mind, because of the changes in climate, you do want to consider that summer in Cape Town is sort of a misnomer, because it's summer for us, but it's actually winter when you are there. It's not a very cold climate, but sometimes students are a bit surprised when they start to look into the program a little bit further and realize that it actually will not be summer when they are there, but actually the middle of the winter. For Tanzania, there are 2 programs. Again, you see another SIT program that has a focus on ecology and natural resource management. When it comes to the coastal region, you have another summer program, again, another one that's going to be run with Georgetown faculty. That's going to have a very strong language component. And so that's an important difference to make when you're looking in distinction to the different options that you have. Uganda is another SIT program that's focusing on a very specific theme within the region, so development studies. And then Zambia is going to be another Georgetown faculty-led summer program, but as its name indicates, it's an African field school. It's a little bit different. It's more hands-on, and it's not exactly the normal type of summer school. So students who are interested in that really do want to make sure that they're looking into exactly how that could work for them academically, to make sure it aligns with, if they're looking to get specific credit, how that could actually work for them. So here we just like to show you a few pictures of what to expect in some of these countries, because we often don't actually know what to expect when we think of the continent. It's very common and very easy just to think of it as one vast contiguous place, when in fact it's quite large, and as you know, has many, many countries that are quite varied in climate as well as demographics. So Botswana, again, we're going through the same order as we had a moment ago. We have Ghana, which is going to be in the western part of the continent, Botswana being in the southern part. South Africa, obviously the southern tip. Tanzania in the eastern part of the continent, with, as you can see, Zanzibar here in the lower right-hand corner with its predominantly Muslim society. Uganda, where you can see some of the colonial town in the right, and then the very, very green landscape on the left, which takes us then to the French-speaking African programs. Unfortunately, we have a few that have been suspended indefinitely that are no longer on this list. So if you have been talking to other students and you've heard of other programs, that may be the reason why. Feel free, though, to let me know if there is something that you wanted to talk more about. You can see primarily in French-speaking Africa, we have a lot of programs thanks to SIT. And like I said, those are going to be programs that expect at least familiarization with French, if not a certain level of degree of comfort level in speaking and using it in the classroom setting. For Cameroon, Madagascar, and Senegal, the expectation is that students have through at least intermediate. So they've completed the intermediate cycle. For Rwanda and Morocco, it depends on exactly which programs you're looking at. They have different expectations, but students should have at least comfort in expressing themselves in a public setting in the language to be able to use it consistently and throughout their experience. Beyond that, one thing that you will notice here is one of the outliers is going to be the Université Catholique d'Afrique Centrale in Cameroon. That is a very unique experience because that allows students to fully immerse into the local university setting and take classes alongside students. While we saw that in a few locations in English-speaking Africa, this is the only place where students can do it fully in French-speaking Africa. And so it's quite unique. Students do appreciate it because it's a Catholic institution, meaning it's private and a little bit smaller than the public institution. And it's quite a unique environment as well for students because it's actually a university that draws from the entire region and not just nationally. So while in other parts of French-speaking Africa, you may well find that there are other languages that are spoken very, very regularly, in this particular setting, French is the dominant language because it is the common language of all the students that are on campus. So that's something that students also really appreciate when it comes to being able to work on their French while they are there locally. The other program where there are some options to take classes at the university would be the program in Morocco that's called Study in Rabat. So the Study in Rabat program does offer courses in-house, meaning just for program participants. But in addition to that, there are opportunities to take classes at the Université Mohamed V, which is the public university in the capital. The one thing that sometimes is a little bit challenging in the beginning about that is trying to find which courses will be offered in French. Because it is a multilingual society, there are courses that could be offered equally in French or Arabic, and it may not be known until the first day of class actually which language the class will be offered in. When students talk about this and ask if that's a challenge, it may be in the beginning. To be quite honest, it may be. But what I often tell students is this is truly what the day-to-day linguistic journey is in Africa. Languages are used much more fluidly than we're accustomed to, and that's something that is good to be able to experience firsthand and regularly, not just in something that's been mitigated and set up for you as a foreigner. So you do see that there are quite an interesting selection of the themes through the SIT programs. In addition to having a background in French, some of these programs may also have you take local languages. So for instance, in Madagascar, in Morocco, in Rwanda, and in Senegal, students have at least the option, if not the requirement, to take the local language in addition to whatever else they might be doing. And that local language would be one of the local ethnic languages and not the colonial language. So that is something that students will often have the opportunity to then experience firsthand, just how do those languages interact on a daily basis and how do people navigate from one language to the next, sometimes within the same conversation. So here you can see some of the photos. Here in Cameroon, on that right-hand side, that is actually the campus that I was talking about, the Université Catholique d'Afrique Centrale. The upper left-hand side is going to be a student activity, and that's something that, sorry, it's not a student activity, it's one that there's students in, but it's one of the activities that students will often participate in, which is the International Women's Day. It's a very, very, very big holiday actually in Cameroon, and students look forward to that all semester. Madagascar, as you can see, is very, very different. You may recognize that scene on the right from the so-named Disney cartoon, but it offers a lot of opportunities for studying the environment, as you can see here. Because it is an island, it offers a very unique landscape to explore when you are interested in exploring the biodiversity of the region. Morocco, as well, as you can see, is quite diverse, and it's a place that students very often like to travel around a lot because it has contrary to some of its neighboring countries, has a very easy to navigate infrastructure network. So it is relatively simple to get around by bus and or by train. And so students are able to do that pretty simply once they get their bearings and get a sense of French and local Arabic. Rwanda, here you can see, if you have not already seen pictures, is quite different from what we may have in our collective memories about the country. You see that the capital is quite developed, and then the countryside is also very, very lush. So that is something that sometimes students are a bit surprised, but pleasantly so, to discover when they are on the ground. Senegal is a place where, sadly, as I mentioned earlier, we once had more programs, but our partner has decided to suspend most of them. We do still have the one program through SIT, and it's a very interesting location because it does serve as sort of a hub for a lot of activity within the French-speaking Western African region. So there are a lot of things going on that are not only national, but international when it comes to relief efforts, humanitarian efforts, and that's something that students often will get involved in when they are on the ground. Oftentimes students will ask then, what are the finances? How does this actually work? So it is important to sort of break things down by different types of expenses. So you have fixed expenses and estimated expenses. The fixed expenses, typically when you're talking about semester programs, are going to be the Georgetown tuition and health insurance, and that's going to be the same across the board, no matter which program you're on. Some of the other program costs could be in fixed and could be in estimated depending on the individual program, and that one of those would be most notably room and board. When it comes to the estimated expenses, though, it is very important to look up some of these. Obviously, we do have some budgets that we have available for students, but it is important also for students to look into those, particularly for some of those things that could vary quite a bit from one student to the next, namely airfare. Getting to the continent, depending where your home is, can be a very lengthy process and sometimes a costly one as well. So it is important to look in advance how long it might take you to get there. Sometimes it could take you close to 2 days to get to some of these locations, depending where you're starting off your journey. But you also want to keep in mind just exactly how you would be getting through there, whether the airports you're looking to go through are ones that you should be going through at this stage. And those are things that we talk about at pre-departure orientations, but we want to make sure that students are thinking about those expenses and finances before they actually commit to the program so that they know what to expect. There are, as I was mentioning, program budgets available on each one of our pages. So our website is studyabroad.georgetown.edu. Each of the programs that we've mentioned here will have its own page on that site. And within that page, you're going to have various sections that address the academics, student life, housing, finances, and how you actually apply. So if you haven't already, you should definitely look at that page to get a sense of exactly what is available and what you should be considering when you're looking at these different programs. When it comes to financial aid and how that applies, for students going on semester programs, whether that be for a single semester or the full year, that aid is going to be fully transportable and does adapt to the needs of the individual program. So if there's a variance in the program cost, partially because of increased airfare and travel expenses to get to that program, that is something that the Financial Aid Office would take into consideration when reevaluating your need for the given semester. When it comes to summer programs, however, that is dependent on the individual program and the individual funding sources for those individual programs. So you really should be looking at the financial section of the program page on our website to see exactly how that works. And that's going to be generally in the form of scholarships. If you are looking at scholarships that are external, the important thing to keep in mind is what is the timeline for applying for those? Because it may not be when you think, it may be much earlier. So it is important to consider when those will be due. They sometimes are due as much as 1 full year before you would be going. So you want to make sure that you're looking into those. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you are looking at scholarships that are need-based or merit-based and you already have a need-based package, is to talk with your normal financial aid counselor to see whether that would have any impact on your current actual package. You want to make sure that you understand exactly what your potential benefit is from applying for some of these awards. So if you're looking for more information, the first place to go is our website. And in that website, you're going to find a lot of information. You're going to find information that's general and generic and applicable to all sorts of programs. That's going to include a lot of financial information. But if you're looking for program specifics, that's when you're going to go into the program brochures. And that's where you'll do a search either by location or time frame or what have you to come up with those programs. It is highly recommended that you attend a Study Abroad 101 session if you can before you start getting too far along in the process, just so you know what to expect at what stages and when's the most appropriate time to start an application, when you should be meeting with folks, and that you have then reasonable expectations as to the timeline that you should be looking at. Meeting with an advisor like myself is a next great step. We typically will advise by deadline. So what we usually suggest is that students who are looking for a year from now, wait just a little bit until we finish with this current advising cycle so that we can make sure to get every student in who's applying to go in the next semester. But we're more than happy to answer your questions over email or during our office hours if there's something just a basic question that you would like to ask. Don't forget, speaking with your deans and with your different faculty advisors is very important to make sure that if you are looking at a program that they agree that the courses available would be things that you could actually apply to your different requirements. And they also might be able to give you some guidance as to perhaps which program would be the best fit for you, knowing where your interests fall. You can always speak with our peer advisors and other returnees. We can put you in touch with some students who have been on the programs, keeping in mind that if you've seen the great diversity of programs that we have in Africa, that doesn't mean that we don't always have a student on every program every semester. Some of those SIT programs are very, very highly focused, and so we don't always have students interested in them in every semester. So there may need to go back a couple semesters before we could find someone who has been on that program to give you their sense and their feedback. On our website, you're also going to find that we have student blogs and so what we call stories from the hilltop, beyond the hilltop rather. And there you're going to find that there are lots of students who have been in various locations talking about their experiences, how the program structures work, what they've been able to see and do both in the classroom and outside the classroom. And that way you can get a sense of whether that applies to what you were hoping to do. And then of course there is social media. Feel free to follow us on all the various platforms, and it's always going to be the same. It's just going to be OGE Abroad. And that way you can see what's going on, and also if you're following us, you can get reminders as to when upcoming deadlines are, when we might be having visitors, at this point virtual, but still when there may be more information sessions and things of that nature. Unfortunately, it looks like our colleague from South Africa may not be able to sign on to join us. So we did anticipate that eventuality. And what I would like to then do before we go into questions is go through a brief presentation that he had put together.
Hi there, and warm greetings from the greening Stellenbosch as we enter into spring. It's a wonderful day out today, the first in a while. We've had a very wet, rainy winter, which is a good thing because we've been in a drought for the past 5 or 6 years, and finally our dams are looking at being about 90 to 95% full. So we're appreciating the sunshine, but also very thankful for the rain that's come before. I'm Joe Warren, and I've been working with Georgetown for almost 10 years now in various capacities. At Stellenbosch University, I am the program manager for global learning, and I'm an adjunct faculty member in the School for Public Leadership, where I teach in a variety of sustainable development programs. For Georgetown, I serve somewhat as an advisor and a coordinator of various global learning activities and initiatives and intercultural opportunities that allow you to explore the complexities of a rapidly evolving South Africa. If you're listening to this, I do apologize. It means that my internet is patchy. And while I have actually a fiber connection, and while the internet speeds in the Western Cape are generally quite equivalent to much of the developed world, we have far fewer cables connecting us with the global network, which means if one of those cables goes down, we do have stability issues. This actually makes an interesting case study because much has been made of Africa's future ability to leverage the fourth industrial revolution to catapult ourselves into global competitiveness and to address many of the complex developmental issues that we have in the country. Stellenbosch and South Africa are places of enormous contradiction, and hopefully you get a little bit of a sense of that from the array of pictures that I've selected in front of you. We are a series of spaces undergoing transformation and experiencing all the pains that go with the radical transition of coming out of a highly oppressive racial ideological state to one that foregrounds human rights and attempts to really improve the situation of the lives of our people. We are a country with one of the most noble constitutions in the world, with an exceptional Bill of Rights, as has been widely noted by, amongst others, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We have a wealth of natural resources, huge diversity across the country, excellent infrastructure and robust systems, including outstanding NGO systems, banking, legislation. But we are also a country plagued by deep structural problems. We have the lasting effects of apartheid and mass corruption. These just are a few of some of our many problems. Stellenbosch is a cute little town, as you can tell from some of those pictures there on the left. It's deeply influenced by its colonial heritage, and in fact it is cheaply called Little Europe by some of the more progressive students. It is also called the City of Oaks, so called because of the oak trees that were originally imported into the town by early settlers who wanted to make wine barrels with local oak. Side note, the oaks grow too quickly in our Mediterranean climate, and so the wood is porous. They couldn't barrel the wine, but we still have the trees as part of that heritage. Wine is considered a flagship industry, and the town and its surrounds are dotted by literally hundreds of wine estates and related businesses, such as little game farms, spas, or hotels, whatever the case might be. However, Stellenbosch is no longer an agricultural town, even though many people think it is. Most of its GDP comes from banking, retail, and increasingly the tech sector. And there's a little area just outside of the city called Techno Park, which is cheekily considered to be the Silicon Valley of Africa. But not everything is charming light buildings, it's technological advance, and a bucolic atmosphere. Stellenbosch is a highly unequal space with very visible divides. These divides, because of our history, fall along racial lines. This racial inequality will be something that you will confront should you choose to live and learn here in Stellenbosch. The university is itself a case study in transformation. It is widely considered an elite global institution, whether you ask around or you do it via the international rankings, but it struggles with its own particular contribution to apartheid. And hence to what South Africa currently looks like and how it operates. For those of you who don't know, Stellenbosch was the academic home of several prominent pro-apartheid scholars, and in fact, just as an example, I still work in a building that is named for one of these thinkers, and it's currently undergoing a process of renaming as part of our visual and symbolic redress policy. Stellenbosch is hard at work redressing some of these issues. Aforementioned policy is a case in point, but there are various others, including decolonizing our curriculum and increasing access. But as we all know, complex systems are incredibly difficult to change. The university is comprised of 10 faculties, and you can study a comprehensive array of subjects, about 99% of which are available in English. Although we are, it's controversial. We're historically an Afrikaans university. Technically, we promote bilinguality with a third language as an optional, isiXhosa, but you can take most things in English. Provided you meet the internal prerequisites, you'll be allowed to study the majority of subjects that any student would. It is, as I mentioned, comprehensive. I think there are 3 subject areas that we don't offer, and those are architecture, dentistry, and veterinary science. For a Georgetown student, based on historical data, I believe you would find plenty of courses in sociology, political science, development studies, literature and history that will be particularly fulfilling to you. Although, of course, you're more than welcome to, take anything across the board. It also happens that I'm the lecturer of the 6 or 9 credit, depending on which version you take, global service learning course that pairs development education and educational theory with an on-site practical component where you teach in a township school. This allows you to learn about the interconnected nature of poverty, education, and development in South Africa. When you're not in classes, there is an enormous country to explore, starting from nearby Cape Town, which you can see the 3rd picture across on the top plane. It is surely one of the world's most beautiful cities, I think you'll agree. To deeply rural areas, as evidenced by that picture below, with one of Cape Town, to Kruger National Park, which you can see by the lines there at the bottom right. And just out of interest, Kruger National Park is just a little bit smaller than New Jersey, just to give you a sense of scale. South Africa is also a sporting mad country, and there will be opportunities to experience many sporting events and other cultural events, which, when we pair those with our weekly discussions, will allow you to engage in some of the intricacies of building an inclusive and equitable post-colonial state. That picture on the top right there is of Cyril Ramaphosa, who's our current president, former majority shareholder of McDonald's South Africa. And to the left is Siya Kolisi, who is the first black captain of our national rugby team, the Springboks. And this is on the occasion of our winning the Rugby World Cup in 2019. And that's at the Union Buildings in Pretoria. The university offers you comprehensive support with specific staff allocated to finances, co-curricular, accommodation, environment, etc. And I encourage you to contact them with specific questions in their areas. However, I'm also more than happy to field any questions you have or guide you to the correct person, and perhaps Dr. Silverson will share my contact details when it is appropriate. So that's it from me. Once again, I'm terribly sorry that I couldn't do this presentation live, but I hope you've learned just a little bit, and this has whet your appetite to join me in Stellenbosch, South Africa in 2021. Have a good evening. Bye.
That concludes that portion. I wanted to see if there were any particular questions that you may have about anything. I know one of the first ones that students often ask is, how do I narrow things down? And I think the biggest thing when it comes down to looking at courses on programs on the continent is, of course, looking at courses and any requirements that you may have. You will quickly find that if you are looking for particular coursework, specifically in some of the lesser traditional subjects, that may narrow down your choices a bit. Linguistic proficiency is also another way to help whittle down the options a little bit, perhaps, is if French is not part of your repertoire, then that would eliminate some of those programs. But otherwise, it's going to be important also to consider the type of setting you'd be living in. Are you looking for something that's going to be an urban setting versus a rural setting? Are you interested in looking at a program that is in a very large metropolitan area? The one thing that students often do need to come to terms with initially is that travel around Africa while on the program is usually not as easy as it would be, for instance, to travel around Asia or Europe in normal times. There's just not the infrastructure in order to be able to do that. So when students are looking to explore during breaks and what have you, they're typically going to be doing that locally within their host country, which, as Joe was pointing out, when it comes to just one of the national parks in South Africa is the size of New Jersey. So if you're looking at some of the sizes of the countries that you would be in, these countries are not small and they have quite a large diversity typically of things to see and do. So typically there's more than enough to occupy your free time over the course of a semester. And then once the semester is over, then you have more availability to be able to get on planes and go further afield and not have to worry so much about connectivity issues and things of that nature. I know that oftentimes students and families will ask about safety. It will depend, exactly on what you understand by safety. There are issues related to student safety everywhere in the world, including in our own backyard here in DC. But generally speaking, there have not been issues related to student safety in Africa since I've been working with the programs, short of petty theft and things of that nature. So we often think about that partially because it's more of an unknown, but as far as our experience goes, students are typically also well-versed before they go. When students are choosing to go to a developing countries, they typically look into a little bit more what the situation is, and so they're not as apt to perhaps expose themselves to perhaps some safety issues as they might if they were in a different country. Where they may not realize that it's as prevalent. Otherwise, when trying to figure out where to be, it is also important to think about the calendar. As I was mentioning earlier, when you look at the South African calendar, some of the programs work on a US-friendly calendar, others follow the local calendar, and that local calendar will be reversed from ours, meaning that their summer break will be over the time of our winter, which means that they will start later, and they will go into the summer. They will start early in the summer and end typically around Thanksgiving time, so that they have that summer break that we're accustomed to, but just in the opposite time of the year. So it is important to consider if you do have other types of commitments that you need to be looking into for the summer, perhaps internships or things of that nature, that you actually have those opportunities laid out and that you can find something that works with what you are looking to do. Other than that, I know that there are also sometimes questions about race and identity. I do not pretend to be an expert on everything related to those questions when it comes to the continent, but I can speak to my own experience as well as experiences students have shared with me. Generally speaking, if you are going with an open mind and looking to explore and learn, people are going to be very accommodating and welcoming. But as we've learned in our own country, of course, it's all how you frame questions and frame your interactions. And so those are things that are talked about during orientations, both pre-departure and upon arrival, just to make sure that inadvertently you're not saying something that a local may misinterpret as something that's less than desirable, given the fact that we are speaking about global languages as well as global English. And if you start exploring some of the websites of our partners in English-speaking African countries, you will realize that just because we use the same words, it does not mean that we all have the same meanings and that we understand them to be the same thing. Again, though, that is part of the diversity of the continent and what makes it so interesting, I find. So I don't know if there are any other questions.
My name's Susan. I'm a moderator. We had a question come through about, can you remind us what French-speaking programs are still running this spring?
Sure. So the French-speaking programs that are running this spring are actually all of the ones that you saw on there. So there have been none that are listed that have been canceled. So that would be all of the programs in Morocco, both programs in Cameroon, the program in Madagascar, program in Rwanda, as well as the program in Senegal.
Okay, and sort of secondary to that was a question about likelihood of running, and I know that we're continuing to update students. So I would encourage anyone who's applying for spring 2021 or thinking of applying to reach out to Dr. Sanderson. Jason, can you speak about housing and are homestays common on these programs? What might that be like?
So that's a really good question because it is really program specific. Housing on these programs is very program specific. Some are going to be homestay, some are going to be dorms. It tends to, if you're looking at the more traditional types of programs, that means not the SIT programs, it tends to go down language lines. So if you're in an English speaking environment, the tendency is that the programs will be based in university student housing because the assumption is that students are able to navigate that. Whereas if you're looking at the programs in the French-speaking countries, they tend to be almost exclusively homestays. If we're looking at the SIT model, those programs usually combine both. Because the programs do take you to various parts of the same country, as sometimes even neighboring countries, so you can compare and contrast the theme that you're studying. You're going to be in sometimes small hostels, in different homestays, so you can get a different sense of how things operate. For instance, if you're looking at the South African ones, they actually go to several different places in South Africa for homestays so that students can experience different ethnic and racial neighborhoods because they are very, very different. And students can experience that firsthand so they can understand better how that would work so that it could perhaps inform some of the research ideas.
Right. A question about, is it possible to get involved in volunteering or internships?
That's another great question. So as far as the volunteering and internships go, generally speaking, volunteering, yes, that's going to be available on almost every program that we offer on the continent. It's going to depend on just how much time you're able to commit and willing to commit. But internships are a little bit different. Internships do need to meet a specified standard in order for students to get credit for those. So those are a little bit rarer to find. That doesn't mean there aren't things that would be on the ground that would resemble an internship, but they may not be credit bearing. The only programs that have them as a built-in option that students can do are honestly going to be, actually it's going to be only at this point the program in Rabat. So the Study in Rabat program is the only program that has a built-in internship option that does not require any further approval. There are others where students can have volunteer experiences that resemble internships, but those would not be for credit.
Great. And one more question, unless anyone has others to submit. What about options for studying science or maybe other non-traditional majors for study abroad?
That's another really good question. It's going to depend on the type of program. So if students are looking to do less traditional, so if we're looking at STEM fields, which are typically considered less traditional when it comes to study abroad, those you're going to be needing to look at full universities for the most part, unless it's one of those SIT programs whose theme is specifically focused on an area that is related to what you're interested in, particularly, for instance, the program on biodiversity in Madagascar or coastal ecology in Tanzania. Otherwise, the programs in Botswana, the regular university Arts and Sciences program offers all sorts of options, but there's also the community health program there as well. And the program at the University of Ghana, that program is going to be a full access as well as what Joe was saying when it comes to full access to these programs in Stellenbosch University as well.
And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention. If in the meantime you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us, whether that be a generic question that you send to globaleducation@georgetown.edu, or if you contact me to either set up an appointment or to ask a question about one of the programs, you're more than welcome to do that as well. My email address is jason.sanderson@georgetown.edu, and you can always find that information through the staff section of our website as well. So I hope this has been informative to you, and if you have any follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to let us know. We're here for that, and that's why we're hoping that this has been helpful, and that if you have any other questions, you'll let us know. And on that, I wish you a wonderful afternoon and have a great rest of the week.